Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. In today's world, it seems like there's always some new curveball coming at us, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Constant change and uncertainty. It's the name of the game these days.
Exactly. So, how do we as organizations not just survive, but really thrive in that kind of environment? Well, that's what we're digging into today. Business continuity management. Think of it as that secret sauce that keeps your essential operations humming no matter what kind of disruption comes knocking.
Whether it's a hiccup in your supply chain or, a full-blown crisis.
Right. We need to be prepared. And
Mm.
for this deep dive, we're not just theorizing, we're going right to the source, the international standard ISO 223.13.2020. Now, I know sometimes standards can sound a little dry, but trust me, this one is full of real-world practical advice that any organization can use, big or small.
Absolutely. It's about building resilience that actually works.
Yeah.
Not just checking boxes.
And to make sure we're giving you the most accurate information possible, we're going straight to the source material for this episode. We're talking excerpts from ISO 223.13.2020 itself.
No interpretations, no summaries, just the real deal.
Exactly, because our goal here is to take these globally recognized best practices and really distill them down to the core principles of establishing and, maintaining effective business continuity. We want to make this clear and actionable for everyone listening, regardless of, your technical background.
And you might be surprised at just how deeply this standard encourages organizations to think about their operations. How they function, their dependencies, even their relationships with the outside world. It's fascinating stuff.
So let's jump right in. The standard starts by really emphasizing the importance of understanding your organization's context. And it's not just a quick glance, it's like a full 360-degree view, both outward and inward.
Right, like Clause 4.1 says it's looking at the external environment.
Okay, so that's things like the political landscape, the legal environment, the economy, technology, your competitors, the whole nine yards. But it's not just about knowing these things exist, right?
Oh, definitely not. It's about understanding how they impact your specific organization. Like, let's say there's a new environmental regulation coming down the pipeline.
Right, which at first glance might seem like a burden, right? More hoops to jump through.
Sure, but looking deeper, it could also create opportunities maybe for new sustainable products or services, or even a shift in the competitive landscape.
I see. So it's about looking for those opportunities hidden within the challenges.
Exactly. It's about thinking strategically, not just reacting. And the same goes for seemingly positive external factors. Yeah. Like a booming economy is great for everyone, right? But what if there's a sudden global recession?
Right. You need to be prepared for that potential downturn as well.
Absolutely. And this is where having a clear understanding of your supply chain is crucial. Who are your critical suppliers? How stable are they? What are the potential risks of disruption?
And then there are all the interested parties outside your direct control. Customers, communities, regulators, even the media. How do you communicate with them? What are their expectations of you?
It's about understanding how you fit into this larger business ecosystem, the good and the bad.
Okay, so we've looked outward. Now let's turn the lens inward. What internal factors does the standard highlight as crucial to understand?
Well, it's really about taking stock of everything that makes your organization tick. Your core products and services, of course.
Right, but also the resources you need to deliver them. People, their knowledge, your finances, technology, even your physical premises.
Exactly. And don't forget your existing management systems, how information flows within the organization, how decisions are made. All of that plays a role in business continuity.
And then there's the less tangible stuff, your company culture, your policies, your objectives, your internal communication channels, even the informal ones.
Yeah, absolutely, because all of these internal elements can be sources of strength or points of vulnerability.
So why is this deep understanding of both the internal and external context so crucial for effective business continuity? I mean, it feels like a lot of work up front.
It is, but it's absolutely essential. Think of it as laying the foundation for a really strong house. If you don't have a solid understanding of the ground you're building on and the forces acting on that structure, your house is not going to withstand the storms.
That's a great analogy. So once we've got this detailed understanding of our context, what's next?
Well, then we move on to identifying our interested parties. Yeah. And this is where Clause 4.2 of the standard comes in.
Interested parties. So we're talking about stakeholders, basically.
Exactly. Anyone who has an interest in what you do and how you do it, and this includes both internal and external stakeholders.
So internally, that could be employees at all levels, different departments, shareholders, the board of directors.
Right. And externally, you've got customers, suppliers, regulators, local communities, emergency services, even the media.
Wow, that's a pretty broad spectrum.
It is, and the standard even includes a helpful figure illustrating different examples of interested parties across various sectors. It's really useful for visualizing this web of relationships.
So we've identified these groups, but it's not just about making a list right. We need to understand their needs and expectations.
Absolutely, and this is where it gets really interesting. You need to look beyond what they explicitly tell you and also consider their implied needs and expectations.
Implied needs. Okay, can you give me an example of that?
Sure. In today's digital world, your customers might not explicitly say they expect you to have robust cybersecurity measures in place.
But it's certainly an implied expectation.
Right, exactly. Because a data breach during a disruption could be disastrous.
Totally. And I can imagine that how you communicate with these different interested parties would need to be tailored as well, especially during an actual crisis.
Oh, absolutely. Your communication strategy during implementation of your business continuity management system is going to be different from how you communicate during a disruption.
So, for example, during implementation, you might use internal newsletters and meetings to keep employees informed.
Right. But during a major power outage, your priority might be to update customers through your website or social media.
Makes sense. Different situations call for different approaches.
Okay, Clay.
Now, Clause 4.2.2
Yeah.
specifically talks about legal and regulatory requirements. Why does this get its own separate section? It seems like the standard is really emphasizing this.
Because it's absolutely critical. Ignoring legal and regulatory requirements related to business continuity can land you in some serious hot water.
We're talking penalties, legal challenges, reputational damage, the whole works.
Exactly. So the standard makes it very clear you need to be aware of all applicable laws, regulations, contractual obligations, anything that pertains to your ability to operate in your specific industry and location.
And these aren't always easy to find, right? Sometimes they're buried deep in legislation or industry-specific rules.
Right, and the standard acknowledges that. It says these requirements can be explicitly stated, implied through general principles, or they can be outright obligatory.
So it's not always black and white.
Not at all. And on top of that, these things are constantly changing new laws, new regulations. So you need a system for staying up to date and understanding what it all means for your business continuity plans.
Right, it's not a one-and-done situation. You have to be constantly monitoring and updating.
Exactly. And once you've identified these requirements, it's not enough to just have them documented somewhere.
Right, they need to be communicated to everyone who has a role to play in ensuring business continuity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Employees, suppliers, anyone who needs to be in the loop, everyone needs to be on the same page.
Okay, so we've covered the context, the interested parties, the legal stuff. Now let's talk about the heart of it all, the Business Continuity Management System, or BCMS. What exactly is this thing we're building?
Well, the introduction and section point 1 of the standard define a BCMS as a comprehensive framework. It's a system of policies, procedures, processes that an organization puts in place to ensure it can survive and recover from disruptions.
So it's kind of like the engine that drives your organization's resilience?
Exactly. And just like any engine, it has essential components that need to work together.
Okay, so what are those must-have components?
First and foremost, you need a clearly defined business continuity policy. This is a documented statement that outlines your organization's commitment to business continuity, sets the overall direction, the why and the how.
Right, so it's like the guiding principle for everything else.
Exactly. And then you need competent people, individuals with defined roles, responsibilities, and the authority to carry out their business continuity duties.
So it's not just about having a plan on paper, it's about having the right people in place to execute that plan.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you have the management processes. This covers everything from initial planning to implementation, operation, performance assessment, management review, continual improvement. It's a whole life cycle.
So it's not a static thing, it's a living, breathing system that's constantly evolving.
Right, and all of this needs to be documented. You need records, procedures, evidence of conformity. This allows you to track your progress, identify areas for improvement, demonstrate compliance, all the important stuff.
It sounds like a BCMS is a pretty complex undertaking, but section point 2 of the standard talks about the benefits, and it's not just about surviving disruptions.
Oh, definitely not. There are so many other advantages. For one, a well-designed BCMS can really help you understand the intricate web of relationships within and outside your organization.
Right, because it forces you to think about who you depend on and who depends on you.
Exactly, and that can reveal vulnerabilities you might not have even been aware of. Plus, it can lead to much better communication, both internally and externally.
And that improved communication can pay dividends even outside of a crisis situation.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And perhaps most importantly, a BCMS fosters a culture of proactiveness and continual improvement. You're always looking for ways to strengthen your resilience.
So it's not just about putting out fires, it's about preventing them in the first place.
Right? It's about being proactive, not reactive.
Now, those are all great benefits, but what about the more tangible business advantages? Does the standard address that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It connects these foundational benefits to real-world outcomes. For example, a robust BCMS can help protect your most valuable assets.
People, infrastructure information is the environment.
Exactly. And it can enhance your reputation, build credibility with stakeholders, give you a competitive edge.
Because if you can keep operating when your competitors can't, that's a huge advantage.
Absolutely. And of course, a good BCMS helps reduce the financial impact of disruptions. Less downtime, faster recovery.
So it can actually save you money in the long run.
Definitely. Plus, it demonstrates your commitment to risk management, which can increase stakeholder confidence and reduce your legal and financial exposure.
Okay, so we've talked about the what and the why of a BCMS. Now let's talk about the how.
Wow.
Section 0.3 introduces the Plan-Do Check Act cycle. Can you explain what that is and why it's so important for business continuity?
Sure, the PDCA cycle is a fundamental framework for managing and improving any system, really. It's a simple but powerful four-stage process. The first stage plan is all about setting your objectives and figuring out how you're going to achieve them.
So in the context of a BCMS, this means defining your business continuity policy setting, measurable objectives, identifying controls and procedures, developing your overall strategy.
Exactly. It's like creating the blueprint for your resilience.
Okay. Then we move on to do. This is where the rubber meets the road, right?
Right. You're putting your plans into action, implementing your policy, training staff, setting up backup systems, establishing communication protocols, all of that.
You can't have resilience without action. So plan, then do. What about check?
Check is all about evaluation. You're monitoring and reviewing your BCMS and conducting tests and exercises, gathering data, seeing if your plans actually work in practice.
So it's not enough to just have a plan. You need to make sure it's actually effective.
Exactly. And this is where you identify areas for improvement. Maybe your backup systems aren't as robust as you thought, or your communication channels break down during a simulated disruption.
Okay, and then finally we have act. What happens in this stage?
Act is where you take those findings from the check stage and you make changes. You implement corrective actions, refine your processes, adjust your policy and objectives. It's about continuous improvement.
So the cycle never really ends. It's about constantly learning and adapting.
Exactly. And Section 0.4 of the standard helpfully connects these 4 PDCA components to specific clauses within ISO 22313.
Well, that's handy. Can you give us a quick overview of those connections?
Sure. So the plan stage aligns with clauses 4 through 7. Clause 4 is understanding your context, which informs your planning. Clause 5 is about leadership and top management commitment. Clause 6 is specifically about planning your business continuity objectives and strategies. And Clause 7 covers the support needed for your BCMS resources, training, communication, documentation, all that good stuff.
Okay, so plan is clauses 4 through 7. Then do would logically connect to clause 8, which is operation.
Exactly. Clause 8 is all about putting your plans into action.
And check aligns with clause 9, performance evaluation.
Right. You're checking to see how well your BCMS is performing.
And finally, act connects to clause 10, improvement.
Right. You're taking action to improve your BCMS based on your evaluations.
So the PDCA cycle really is the backbone of the entire standard. Now let's get down to brass tacks. What is business continuity really all about? What are we trying to achieve with all this planning?
Well, according to Section 0.6 of the standard, business continuity is the capability of an organization to continue delivering its products or services at acceptable predefined levels following a disruption.
Okay, so it's not about preventing disruptions altogether. That's often impossible.
Right. It's about being able to function even when things go wrong.
And to what extent you can function depends on your specific organization and its priorities.
Exactly. You need to determine what's essential.
Yeah.
What level of service is acceptable, what timeframes you're working with.
So business continuity is really about defining those parameters and then putting the mechanisms in place to meet them.
Exactly. And Section 8.1.2 defines business continuity management as the process of establishing, implementing, maintaining, and continually improving those capabilities.
It's a continuous cycle of activity.
Right. And it's aimed at preventing losses and mitigating the impact of disruptions.
Now, the standard outlines some key elements involved in effective business continuity management. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. First, you need to identify your critical products and services. What are the essential activities needed to deliver them?
Okay, so we're figuring out what absolutely needs to keep running.
Exactly. Then you analyze the impacts if those activities are disrupted. What are the consequences? What resources are affected?
So we're talking about people, technology, facilities, information, the whole 9 yards.
Right. And then you need to understand the risks of potential disruptions.
Yeah.
What could prevent you from delivering those critical services?
So we're thinking about things like natural disasters, cyber attacks, supply chain failures, power outages, all of that.
Exactly. And once you understand the impacts and the risks, you can start to prioritize. Which services need to be recovered first? What are the acceptable timeframes? What minimum capacity do you need to operate at?
And that understanding then informs your business continuity strategies.
Right. You develop plans and solutions, backup systems, alternate locations, recovery procedures, all tailored to your specific needs and priorities.
And of course, you need to regularly review, test, and update those arrangements.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because things change. Your business evolves. The threat landscape shifts. You need to stay ahead of the curve.
This whole process really seems like a shift in mindset from reacting to problems to proactively building resilience.
It is. And the standard even includes a couple of figures, figures 2 and 3, that illustrate this. Figure 2 shows how effective business continuity allows for a rapid and controlled response to a sudden disruption. You're minimizing the impact and bouncing back quickly.
And figure 3 shows how business continuity can also help manage more gradual disruptions like a pandemic. You can anticipate the impacts, take proactive measures, maintain essential functions.
Exactly. The key takeaway is that planning ahead makes a huge difference.
Now, one thing the standard really emphasizes is that business continuity should focus on the impact of a disruption rather than the specific cause. Why is that distinction so important?
Because there are countless ways a disruption can occur. Trying to plan for every single scenario is impossible and, frankly, not very effective.
It would be like trying to boil the ocean.
Right. But if you focus on the potential impact, the inability to access critical data, the inability to manufacture products, the inability to communicate with customers, then you can develop more adaptable plans.
So you're preparing for the consequences, not just specific events.
Exactly. And that makes your business continuity plans much more robust and resilient.
So to sum up, what are the key takeaways from our deep dive into ISO 223.13.2020? What are the essential things our listeners should remember?
First, understand your organization's context, both internal and external. Second, know your interested parties, their needs, their expectations, and the legal and regulatory requirements that apply to you. Third, implement a structured BCMS based on the PDCA cycle. And finally, focus on the impact of disruptions, not just the causes.
Great advice. It's clear that building business continuity is about so much more than just disaster recovery.
It is. It's about building a more resilient and adaptable organization. It's about future-proofing your success.
Couldn't agree more. And on that note, here's a final thought for our listeners to ponder. Considering the interconnectedness of modern organizations, what is one unexpected dependency that, if disrupted, could have a significant impact on your ability to function?
It's a question worth asking yourself. What are those hidden vulnerabilities in your operational chain?
Food for thought indeed. And if you're interested in learning more about the specific requirements for a BCMS, check out the full ISO 223R1 standard.
It's a great resource for taking your business continuity efforts to the next level.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.
See you next time.
Take care, everyone.